So as a matter of review, when we create a new file, unlike a lot of the other apps, the tabs do matter up here along the top. And I mean, they matter from a standpoint of I think it just makes things simpler. Most everything we're doing in here is for print production, unless I say otherwise. So usually we want to start out by, we want to select this print button up here because that's going to set our color space down here. Remember that anytime we're working with print, we're working with CMYK colors, regular printing colors. If it's display stuff, social media, website, video, those are all RGB. So it just simplifies it. If you select print, that'll set all of these settings by themselves. So you don't have to worry about those. So I'm going to change, here in our sidebar, I'm going to change just to inches for right now. And I want to make a 7" by 7" artboard. Bleed we'll ignore for the time being until we're ready to really kind of talk about it. But that'll get us going, and we'll just create a new document. So should have an interface that looks something like this, except that I am going to start working with under the window menu, I'm going to work with the Essentials workspace. And I'm just going to reset mine real quick so that it looks like yours. So basically, the Essentials workspace is a very limited set of stuff. We should be working with the standard tool set. So if you see the side-by-side bar, there's one with 2 columns. Go up to Window, down to Toolbars, and select the basic one. And then for this Essentials workspace, really we just see this limited set of stuff over here on the right. Properties, a properties panel, a layers panel, and a libraries panel. So I'm going to start off with the artboard. Let's take a look at that. We can manipulate, once we've set this up, we can manipulate this artboard. We can change the number of artboards in our document. We can have multiple artboards. We really only ever want to have the number of artboards that we actually need. So initially, for our first 5 assignments, we really only need a single artboard. But if we go over to our toolbar, go all the way down here near the bottom, there's this little gray page with a couple little tick marks on the corner, right here. If we click on that, that's the artboard tool. And you'll see that this changes a little bit. And I can actually resize this artboard to something different if I want to. It's just like a shape or anything else. Command Z will undo anything I do. But I can do a resize on it. And then I can even add additional artboards. So the little plus signs, the easiest way is the little plus signs that show up when you hover over top of it. If you click on a plus sign, it'll add a new artboard to whichever side you click on. If you need to remove an artboard, just with the artboard tool selected, click on the artboard and tap your delete key. It's as simple as that. I can also move them around, which, maybe you need to, maybe you don't. But another way that you'll see me create a duplicate of an artboard, there are a lot of modifier keys available in Illustrator, and I'm going to point those out as often as I can. So a lot of times you'll notice that I click on an artboard and might hit my Option key and drag it, and I can duplicate an artboard that way as well. That same process works for any object that I'm working with in Illustrator, a shape or type or anything else. Command Z undoes that. Another modifier key, if I click on this, my Option key is the one that'll duplicate. If I tap my Shift key as well, both of them, and drag, again, it'll duplicate, but it's going to constrain it to be directly across from the other one. So not hitting the Shift key allows me to freeform move it around. Tapping the Shift key allows me to constrain. And the same thing happens, with this artboard. If I can move this around, but if I hold down just my Shift key, click on it, Oops, click on it, hold down my shift key. The order does matter. I can drag it around, but I can constrain it to be exactly horizontal, or if I go up, it'll be directly above it or below it. And again, works for all elements in Illustrator. So you'll see me do that a lot. It's a quick, like I've said before, the quicker you can work, the better, you know? So the keyboard shortcuts, the modifier keys, they all just make the process faster. I can also, so I've got my Artboard tool selected. If we go over here to our sideboard and look at our properties panel, you'll see that I've got a bunch of Artboard related options here. The most notable ones that I want to point out are these two checkboxes right here. Move artwork with the artboard and scale your artwork with the artboard. So if you have move artwork with the artboard checked, then if you move your artboard around, the artwork's going to go with it. If it's unchecked, the artwork won't go with it. It'll leave it behind. The same thing goes for scale the artwork with the artboard. If I have that checked and I need to scale this up, I can either change my dimensions up here on my properties panel by typing them in, or I can manually, click on the corner and drag it. It'll scale your artwork as well. So just kind of keep that in mind. But generally speaking, when we create our document, the artboard that we have is what we're going to work with until we get into our third or so project, and then we might have multiple artboards. So everything I've given you is information. Generally speaking, you're going to create an artboard, and that's what you're going to work with, all right? But just know that my properties panel always changes based upon the tool or the object that I have. And if I select my artboard tool over here, I can manually also change the size of this artboard. I can make it 8 inches by 12 inches if I wanted to. I'm going to undo that with Command Z a couple of times. I can also, with this width and this height, I've got this little link over here to the side. Right now it's unchecked, which means that I can independently change the dimension, the width and the height of the artboard. But if I click that and make that link active, when I change my width to say 10, it's also going to change my height to 10. If it's an 8.5 by 11 page, and I have this checked, and I want to change it to a 10-inch wide page, I'll just change it to 10, and the height will be the proportional dimension. So it'll keep it in that letter format, just make it bigger. This link shows up all over the place in Illustrator for different things. So just the knowledge of what the link does is the important thing here. All right? All right, I'm going to delete this artboard because I don't want it. All right, so that's my artboard. So the next item would be, so I already pointed out my properties panel tends to change with whatever tool I have. I've got my layers panel out here next. So everything we're going to work on our documents in layers. Layers help keep our file organized and clean. It becomes, especially when we get into later assignments where we've got a lot of different elements, it helps us to keep things organized. So just a real quick tour around this panel. If I want to add a new layer, first off, I should always be naming my layers. So I can simply name a layer by going out here, and on top of the layer name, if I double click on that, it'll highlight the box. And I'm just going to call this my artwork layer. I really don't care how you name your layers. but a document with a bunch of layers in it named layer 1, layer 2, layer 3, layer 4, and layer 5, on and on and on, does nobody any good. So I don't really care how you name your layers, so long as it makes sense to you. But what I should never see whenever I open a document to grade it is layer 1, layer 2, layer 3. Yeah. I'm sorry, can you speak up?
Oh, never mind, I got it.
You got it? Okay. Remember, you got to speak up. And now I'm stuck back here in this corner today, so that doesn't help me at all. So anyway, that's how we can name our layers that way. If we want to add a new layer, we can do it one of two ways. Down at the very bottom is a square with a plus sign. I can add a new layer, click on that, and that'll add a new layer. The other way to do it, and all of these panels have this, there's a little hamburger menu up here at the very top. Move my cursor around so you can see. Up here at the very top, if I click that hamburger menu, I have options that are available for that particular menu, and I can create a new layer here. I've also got panel options. If I go down to that, I can increase the size of my thumbnails if I want to. Right now that's set to medium. I can set it to large or something else. If I change it to large, they're just bigger. So, but again, that's that little hamburger menu. All the panels have it. The panel options, I'm just going to switch that back to medium. As you can see, I'm really not going through every single thing here just because I'm hitting the things that matter. The other ones you can kind of explore. You can find other tutorials that kind of go through piece by piece if you want. But basically, if I don't touch it, if I don't cover it here, I generally haven't had a huge use for it. So, but that's our layers panel. So let's add a couple of things. I want to add a couple of things to my artboard here. So I'm just going to go to my, if I go over here to my tools, about the fifth one down, I have an ellipse. But if I click on that, there's also the other shapes behind it. I'm just going to draw a rectangle and a square. I'll talk more about shapes in a little bit. I just want elements on my artboard. What they are doesn't matter if you're following along. If I go now over here and look, layer 2 is my selected layer when I put those down, so that's where they're at. Now I have a little arrow next to that layer, and if I open it up, I can see each of the objects that sit on that layer. And we'll come back to this later on in this demo. So, but just know that we can look at the contents of a layer this way. If I, I'm going to go click on my artwork layer. Actually, let's name that one. Oh, for crying out loud. There we go. Boxes. If I select my artwork layer, and I'm just going to go back over here and grab an ellipse and draw an ellipse on it, this object lives on this layer. So I can, out here to the side, I've got my eyeballs for view, and right next to that is a lock. So if I turn the layer on and off, that layer's objects will disappear. Again, when we're building files, building out artwork, another very useful kind of a thing, because maybe I have a piece of artwork that's a guy sitting at a desk, and I've got my guy on one layer and the desk on another layer. I'm only working on the guy, and I don't want to be distracted by the desk. I can turn off the desk layer and hide it. Or, eyeballs on and off. Then right next to that, if I click, that's a lock. So remember, my circle, my ellipse, is on my artwork layer. I can't grab that object at all. It's locked down. Again, beneficial to my earlier example. If I'm doing a picture of a guy sitting at a desk, maybe I do want to have the desk, I'm working on the guy, I do want to have the desk in place all the time, but I don't want to inadvertently click on or move something associated with that. I can lock that layer down. So working with layers is a valuable kind of a thing. And then the last thing I think with layers that I really want to talk about. Notice that I don't have anything selected, but like I've got an ellipse on my artwork layer. If I go all the way out here to the right-hand side and click, it's locked down, so I can't do it. Let me unlock that. Click on that. I can select that object by clicking out here to the right of it in this layer. Alternate ways of selecting things. This ability is more beneficial if I have a layer with a whole lot of elements on it. And as I'm having a hard time selecting it from my artboard, I can come in here and do it as well. So, that is, yeah. So those would be my layers. I'll briefly touch on this libraries tab just because it's here. We're not going to use it a whole lot yet, but libraries are collections of elements that you can put together for particular projects or jobs or things that are available across all the Adobe Creative Cloud apps. So I, for instance, have a library here. I've got a fairly big one for most of my clients and whatnot. If I select Akron Children's, you see that generally I use my libraries for color palettes. These are their brand colors. And they're all set up in a variety of ways, but they're named by their hex codes. So, you know, I can keep collections of stuff this way. We're generally not going to work with the library panel all that much, but just know that it's there. And like I said, it's available across all of your Creative Cloud apps. So later on, when we go into InDesign, it'll also have a libraries tab. These exact libraries are going to be available in it because they're tied to my Adobe Creative Cloud account. So you can do that. But we're not, like I said, not working with it much, so we'll kind of skip off. The last item here is this little, and I think we might actually use this more. I never really have, but I think I might try it out this semester. This is a sharing option where you can actually create a link and share a document for review with people. The only thing about it is it does save documents to the cloud, which is okay. I just don't want you working on cloud documents. So, but we'll come back to that later if we need to. So before I move on, any questions about any of this? Okay. So I am just going to, the objects I put on my artboard, I'm going to delete those. I just want to be back to a single artboard. So I'm going to add some additional panels to this. So I'm going to go up here to my window menu, and I want to go down here to my align tools, and I'm going to select those. And what it'll do is bring up a floating menu that I can move around that has 3 different sets of tools on it. It's got it has some transform tools, the align, which is what I really wanted, and my Pathfinders. Both the align and Pathfinders is what we're going to look at here. So it brings this panel up as a floating window that I can move around. If you want to organize your workspace a little bit more, and even customize a workspace and save it, we can grab a hold of the bar up here at the top and drag it over top of these flyouts. And you see how I have, and I've clicked on it, I've still got my button pressed. See how it turns blue there? If I slide over here, it'll turn blue along the side. That indicates where I'm going to dock this to. So I want to dock it right here. And basically it'll just drop those tools right there. I can close that up. And now if I click on the icon for my align tools, they'll just fly out from this sidebar and I can close them back up. So they're always here, handy to gain access to. And I can put whatever tools I want, whatever flyouts I want to here. So I've added these. Let's take a look at the align tools real quick. The align set. Something I use a lot, something you'll see me use a lot. The align tools work on absolutely anything in Illustrator from top to bottom. It'll work on artboards, it'll work on guides, it'll work on everything. So if I were to go back to let's go look at the artboard here real quick. If I go back to my artboard tool, I'm just going to drag this to the side, and then I'm going to hit my option key, click on this, and drag a copy of it off over to the side. Now I've got, and actually I'm going to, Command minus on my keyboard will zoom out, by the way. I'm going to rearrange these kind of like this, just for demonstration purposes. So with these two selected, if I select one of them and I hold down my shift key and select the other, so I've got them both selected, open up my align panel, I can align these in a variety of different ways. How they get aligned depends upon this align to option in the bottom right. So with these artboards, I just want to clean up my workspace. I'm going to align these on centers horizontally. So if I come up here, I've got all these options: align to the left, align to the center, align to the right, align tops, vertical center, bottom. I'm just going to align these to vertical center. So I've got those selected. When I click on that, it'll align them right up. These align, like I said, left, right, top, bottom. Distribute objects will actually distribute them and space them. So, and these align tools, like I say, work on everything: guides, objects, artboards, you name it. You can use them for anything. And I frequently use them for, most people only ever use them to align objects. It's all most people ever use them for. But they're very useful with aligning guides, I've come to realize as well. So those are my align tools. And let's select this one. I'm going to Command plus, we'll zoom back in. And if I hold down the option or the space bar on my keyboard, that'll turn it to the hand and I can pan around. So I've got my first artboard selected here. Let's go up. And the next thing I want to look at is this Pathfinder panel. And I'm just going to show you this briefly right now, but we're actually going to use it here later on. So Pathfinders allow us to manipulate objects by either uniting them or using a variety of different methods. Subtract one object from another. So, and one of the things you'll hear me kind of talk about is our destructive methods of working versus non-destructive methods of working. Destructive methods, basically when I do anything to an object, that's destructive for the most part. Or when I change something in a meaningful way, like if I subtract one object from another, cut a chunk out of my square and change its shape, generally that's destructive, meaning that I can't undo that. I can undo it immediately with Command Z, obviously. But if I save my document and come back to it later, I can't modify that object. Versus things that I'll do that do allow me to continue to manipulate the action later on and even undo it, change it. So I'll point those out as I go through them. But Pathfinders, I'm going to go back over here to my toolbar, grab an ellipse, and I'm actually going to go over here with that ellipse selected. I'm going to go over here to my properties panel, click on the fill, and I'm going to change that to black. And I'm going to select my stroke, and I don't want to stroke on anything, generally speaking. We're going to try to avoid using strokes on objects. So I just want it to be a black fill with no stroke. So I created that. I'm going to go back to my toolbar, select my rectangle tool, and just draw a shape that overlaps it, just to look at these tools. So I'll select those. And if I look at these Pathfinders, I'm going to focus on the shape modes at the top. So if I select both of these, and go up here. This very first one is Unite or Join or Union. Forget how they refer to it exactly. But if I click on that Unite with both of those selected, it turns them into a single shape. So I'm going to hit Command Z on my keyboard and undo that. So I've got back to two shapes. The next one across is minus front. So basically what's going to happen is whatever objects in the front or on top is going to be subtracted from the object behind it. So if I select both of these and do minus front, that cuts the square out of the circle. And the two out next to it are kind of descriptive of what they do. I'm just going to undo that real quick so I'm back to my two shapes. With both those selected, this next one across is intersect, and it will give me the shape. It'll give me the shape that results will be basically this shape where they overlap. So if I click on that, you'll see that. Undo that. And the last one will simply subtract this area where they overlap from the overall shape. So, and then these Pathfinders do similar kinds of things. You can kind of explore those too. But one of the things I do want to point out about the Pathfinder panel is that if I select both of these and I hold down my Option key, when I click on, say, minus front, it's going to do that. But if you notice, it still has both of my shapes there. So it looks like what I want, but both of them are there. If I double click on the square, I can actually access that and slide it down here. Say that's not where I wanted to cut my chunk out at. I want to do it down here. I can do that. Then, and whenever I double click on that, that takes me into what's called isolation mode, which I can always see from here. Then when I double click, I'm back to this shape. So the first way I used this before, whenever I cut it and it just changed the shape, that would be a destructive method of working. Doing it this way by holding down the Option key is a non-destructive method because I can still modify and change this. The only thing about working non-destructively is that sooner or later I want to make that destructive. I want to actually enforce this shape. And whenever I'm ready to do that, if you notice out here to the side with this object selected, there's an expand button. If I click expand, that commits that change. So both ways of doing it are perfectly fine, but if you do it the non-destructive way by holding down that Option key, sooner or later you do want to expand it into a single shape. All right? And that's what our Pathfinder panel does. Is there something else? Why don't we... All right, so let's do one last thing. I'm going to delete that object, and I'm going to delete the second artboard as well. I don't need it. Select that and delete it. So let's look at guides. So we can create guides to help us keep things aligned, keep things organized on our artboard. They simply show on screen. They don't print or anything else. The way we get our guides, we can do this a couple of ways, but I really need my rulers available within my workspace in order to pull my guides out from. So I can do this one of two ways. I can go to my View menu, all the way down towards the bottom. There's a Rulers option, and I can show rulers, which is also Command R on my keyboard, which is what I'm going to use from this point forward. But this is where you find it. View menu, Rulers, show rulers. And that'll bring up a ruler along the top and a ruler along the left. And if I just click out here in the ruler, click and drag, I can drag a guide down into my workspace. And I can do the same thing from the left. And pull out my guides. Now I can pull out as many guides as I want. Let's do this. Let's do those. And I'm going to put one up here. I'm just going to put a series on here because I want to do something with this. So I can pull out guides. I can't really move them around. If I go back to my view menu, down to rulers, or sorry, down to guides, right below rulers is guides, I can unlock those guides if I want to, so I can still move them around. I can clear them out, or I can hide them. But I'm just going to unlock them so that I can grab it, and so I can still grab one of them and kind of move them around, reposition them. I can also do that by, if I right-click, I'm using my mouse, a 3-button mouse, but you can do this with the control key. If you control-click, hold on your control key and click, you get a contextual menu, and we can also lock our guides this way and unlock our guides from the contextual menu. That's a quicker way of going about it, to be honest. Anytime you got to travel up here to the menu, that's the slowest way to do it, but contextual menus get you pretty far through a lot of this as well. So you can lock or unlock, release them, hide them, that kind of thing. So I've already got these unlocked. What I wanted to point out here was that, remember I said with our align tools, we can use those on absolutely anything. If I click and drag over top of all these guides, I can select them all at the same time. I'm going to go to my align panel, down to distribute, and I'm going to look at distributing vertically based upon, I'm going to align them to the artboard. So I'm going to select align to artboard, go back up here to distribute vertically. If I click on that, that'll distribute my guides evenly over my artboard. Great for creating grids. When we start talking about grid layouts later on, it's great for that kind of thing. But that's how I can pull out guides. Just so you know, too, you can create guides out of pretty much anything. So if I want to create, I can create a primitive shape, an ellipse, for instance. Draw a circle. If I go to, let's see, if I control click or right mouse button click, I can go down and make a guide out of this selected object. You see now it's light blue and it's just a guide. And then I can also lock all these down again. So any shape I can use to make guides out of as well. Even type, if I create outlines, create a path out of it, I can create a guide out of type if I want. So completely flexible. They're not limited to the lines it's amazing how many people don't realize you can do more than just pull guides out from the rulers with guides. Super helpful. So those are guides. Any questions before I move on?